From the far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy, it's Retro Nerd Girl with a film review for you. Today, I'll be reviewing the movie Things to Come, released in 1936. Starring Raymond Massey, Edward Chapman, and Ralph Richardson. Directed by William Cameron Menzies. The synopsis is, this is a story of a proposed future for mankind from 1936, spanning a devastating war, leaping into the future, and reaching out to conquer space. The story. The film is an adaptation of a very famous science fiction book predicting the future of humanity, The Shape of Things to Come by H.G. Wells, published in 1933. And he also wrote a screenplay for this film and had a very constructive role in actually making the film. In fact, it was rumored that he began as the film's director until it was obvious that a director with experience was needed to bring this incredible epic to the screen. William Cameron Menzies took over as director, who is famously known for his fantastic production and design career. H.G. Wells, however, made it known that whatever happened, he didn't want the film to resemble Fritz Lang's film Metropolis, released in 1927, which was the only other well-known futuristic sci-fi epic at the time. Wells famously hated the film and even wrote a very harsh critical analysis of the film. Right away, the film had to deviate from the book because of the way it was written to tell the accountings of the past by a man from the 22nd century. There were really no characters to follow, and it doesn't read like a novel. The original timeline began from 1933 until the year 2106. The film shrunk it down a bit to span from 1940 to 2036. The timeline is broken up on screen to 4 distinct sections. 1940 is where things really begin to stray from our actual history. Oddly, another famous science fiction motion picture with a similar storytelling scheme in the time segments that don't really follow any particular character is 2001: A Space Odyssey, released in 1968, directed by Stanley Kubrick. And as a side note, to prepare for that film, co-writer Arthur C. Clarke had Stanley Kubrick watch Things to Come. Within the film, William Cameron Menzies snuck in a nice little tribute to H.G. Wells, as there is a scene where a newspaper states the war in the film ends on the 21st of September in 1966, and that would have been Wells's 100th birthday. The pacing. At an hour and 40 minutes, it feels more like 3 hours actually. There's a lot of scenes that are repeated to drive home an idea that we got so many times before. You really feel like a few more edits would have really impacted the story and made it a little bit more snippier. Now the challenge. The story begins as we follow a 1940s businessman turned military pilot, John Cabal, and later his grandson doppelganger and ruler of the future world of 2036, Oswald Cabal. The underlying story is that the progress of mankind is always being challenged by those who do not want to change or can't imagine the greater good that progress can do. War breaks out during Christmas of 1940 with an unnamed enemy. We're talking about the complete desolation and devastation of a once thriving city. It sends the country into a depressing dystopia by 1966, when the war finally ends. That's 26 years of war, so it takes a toll on the survivors. But the struggle is not over. The countryside is actually plagued with a highly transmissible disease that they call the wandering sickness, and that it essentially turns its victims into zombies. The zombies then spread the sickness to others, and unfortunately they must be killed in order for humanity to survive, adding to the psychological stress that they're all facing. At about 1970, humans in the Everytown are finally beginning to build a social structure from the ruins under the leadership of Rudolph, who is also called the Chief. It is then that the Chief becomes the central evil, or at least that's what the film wants you to believe. There's no doubt about it, he's very selfish and he rules like a dictator. But the townspeople really love him and they believe in him because he's been leading them all this time. And after all that they've been through, he's out to preserve what they have and get his hands on more technology. What he really wants is guns and airplanes, so that way he can form a protection. His cruelty is mostly directed to threats from the outside world, such as the hill people and a strange visitor who arrives in an airplane. But one gets the idea that his power is going straight to his head, and it'll probably lead to a lot of injustices. But he hasn't gotten to that level of harm yet. He's not quite a bad guy, just brewing into one. His advisor is his girlfriend and possible wife, Roxana Black. She is a fascinating character, but she doesn't really pose as a challenge except to support the Chief and to provide a fantastic monologue describing her dreams of adventures elsewhere in the world. I really enjoyed seeing her on screen. In the last sequence of the film, in the year 2036, man has advanced so far technically that he attempts to space travel with a new invention called the space gun. A sculptor, Theotokopoulos, which we'll just call him Theo for short, wants mankind to have a period of rest, as he calls it, and also put aside progress for a while. And initially, I just really laughed a little, because why would anyone want to put aside progress? But he's really against this space gun. He doesn't like that idea. And why does this bother him so much? And Theo talks to the crowds in the city of Everytown about his ideas, and many of them are listening, especially the older generation. In the film, the space gun really seems to rub people the wrong way in this culture, because it means that the subjects that are going into space will be risking their lives for the endeavor. And in this particular society, death is a very rare happenstance. So they're willing to destroy technology in order to preserve their emotional stress. They are afraid of change, even though it may assist mankind. These people are really meaning to destroy that space gun machine just to save the lives of the pilots. In their hearts, they're really trying to do something they believe is a good thing. I love characters and challenges like this, because it doesn't set the world up in this black and white good evil thing. The empathy, I really can't say I felt much empathy for the Cabal character, whether he's depicted as John Cabal or his grandson Oswald. He is supposed to be our messenger, driving home the ultimate message that the film wants to convey through his monologues. However, his message is delivered with maniacal rigidness that doesn't always appeal to me as a viewer. It dances on the fine line of being inspiring or frightening. We are first introduced to John Cabal before the war, and we learn of how his life was like. We meet John Cabal again, much older, in 1970, where he is a pilot for the Wings Over the World, based in Basra, Iraq. John Cabal warns every town that the wings over the world will take over their world for the better good of mankind. This new world order actually acts more like Star Trek's feared enemy, the Borg, ready to gobble up and assimilate smaller, weaker cultures. I suppose all countries, races, and cultures will eventually be one big mixed community. It sounds wonderful, but only if it happens in a way that is gentle, allowing people to choose of their own free will. Wings Over the World is doing this all by force, although they are presented as the good in the film. Another interesting connection to the Borg that's presented in the film is the way that John Cabal never uses his name in 1970, but always refers to himself as we and speaks as if his life alone means nothing, but his actions are connected to the benefit of his people. There is no selfishness in his view. In 2036, John Cabal has died a hero, and his grandson Oswald is in charge of things in this new world. The Oswald's daughter and a young man are going to take part in some of the space travel experiments, and Oswald has to convince the young man's father, Raymond Passworthy, of the good that will come of it. This is when we get the closing message of humanity's incessant desire to make progress, and I believe that is truly inspiring. The technical aspects. The first time I saw this film, I was blown away by the detail and the craftsmanship that was put into each section of the film. A lot of the storytelling is well done visually through graphic montages and the use of text to explain things. I enjoyed the detail that was put into all of this, and I found it to be easy to follow, and maybe too easily because some of it was just a pinch redundant to me. But at the same time, the money and staging is visibly put into each scene, featuring great textures of art design. The detailing in the throne room and bedroom for the chief is a great example of that, where you can vividly see that there was once great opulence in these war-torn settings. There were obvious places where models were used, and they look pretty good to show exactly how expansive the world is and the transformation of this undetermined place, every town. The costumes were pretty amazing to me, especially the costumes for the different groups of people in the 1970s segment. The townspeople were in rags, but were slowly trying to figure out some sort of style. The main characters were more put together. Roxana had a very primal gypsy look as she schemed on the sidelines. The chief had a very savage yet regal look with a military flair and dirty furs draping him into kind of to denote his complex personality traits. We have this black alien design of Cabal's costume in the 1970s segment, contrasting the citizens of every town. His presence there is scary as they resist the change, and his clothing reflects that. He is wearing a rigid torso armor to reflect his firm stance on his views. He really looks like a creature from the future. What a wonderful display of creativity. I loved every moment of it. The costumes for 2036 were a futuristic mix of Mediterranean togas and Japanese samurai-inspired wear. Performances were all really good in my view. I mean, there's a specific style to it that was prevalent in the era, and I always seem to enjoy that kind of acting. It's not like how acting is done today. It's more stage presence. It's more like stage acting, where there's a lot of projecting and a lot of times even words that are being spoken in a rhythmic fashion. I always find that kind of acting very entertaining. The two actors of note were Ralph Richardson and Margareta Scott, who both gave scene-stealing performances. Ralph Richardson said that he intentionally modeled his character after the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. Margareta Scott was especially great as Roxana Black, and it seemed as if she may have had a few more scenes that I didn't get to see in the version I saw, because she was also credited as being Rowena Cabal, Oswald's wife in 2036. The best part of the film. Best part of the film for me, I really enjoyed Roxana Black's monologue, where she describes that she craves adventure and being a woman is holding her back from being great based on the world that she's living in. And I like the idea of the gas of peace, where the battle is won without even one drop of blood being spilled, and without any violence at all. Because of my propensity for science fiction, I especially enjoyed the segment in 2036 most of all. The scenes where they're actually building this beautiful utopia and showing the scenes afterwards. I just love how it looks, and it's very reminiscent of some of the movies later and how they incorporated the same kind of look into their futuristic worlds. And especially I love the things that we have today in our society, like flat screen TVs and a smaller screen technology that we actually use today, and what almost looks like a cell phone. I love all these little things that these movies have predicted that we actually have now. Now the ending is pretty climactic, with citizens trying to chase down our protagonist to stop them from using the space gun. Now, this gun is fired and sends the two pilots into space. Oswald is comforting the father of one of the pilots that their children will return. Now, his closing monologue is pretty fantastic, that mankind is destined to keep seeking answers into the unknown and achieve progress for the species. It's very hopeful and I think immensely inspiration, whether you agree with everything he says or not. Now, my wish list. I wish the film had better pacing, because it would have made it easy for a lot of people to follow, and I'm sure it would have had a lot more fans over the years. My other thing is that I wish that there was an explanation for the chief dying. The gas puts everyone to sleep, but it actually kills him, and there could be an excuse that he fought the effects of the gas and that killed him. Now, my enjoyment. According to an article published in Variety, this was the first $1 million picture produced in England, and it was included amongst the 1001 movies you must see before you die, edited by Stephen Schneider. Film historians consider this to be one of Great Britain's first major science fiction films. I thoroughly enjoyed this film for the inspiring message it contains at the very end and the incredible visuals of a wonderful future world. And I think that the first one that I ever saw that I really loved was Logan's Run, released in 1976, which has this very similar style and many similar moving images. And I hadn't really heard of this film until about maybe 5 years ago, when I was doing some research for a lo-fi sci-fi project I was doing. And I thought for many years that Metropolis was the only science fiction black and white film out there. But I was completely wrong, and there are actually a good handful of them with absolutely great ideas and great visuals, and this is one of them. If you have some patience and some time, definitely check this one out. I feel as if it's very important for us as a culture to remember these old science fiction films so we can understand where the genre started from and appreciate how far we've come. And much like the film's message, imagine how far we can progress with it in the future. My rating is an 8.5. Well, that sums up my review. I hoped you liked it. This is Retro Nerd Girl signing off. Take care, movie lovers. I'm off to my next review.